Before Disney was upsetting audiences with live-action remakes of their classic animated features, ABC was doing kind of a better job at it. I have no shame in admitting that the show Once Upon a Time did in fact, once upon a time, capture my attention long enough to sit through each individual season. Let me tell you guys, this is a show with some very high highs and some extremely low lows. However, this is a show that is seeming to get a second life, or a bit of a renaissance, if you will, and I think that has something to do with Disney pumping out all of these live-action remakes. Even live-action remakes of recent movies that are still doing animated sequels. Look, I don't know what's going on at Disney, but what I do know is that we are in for a treat because today we are going to be taking a look back on ABC's Once Upon a Time. Let's get into it.
Once Upon a Time was created by the writing team of Adam Horowitz and Edward Kitsis, who've been friends since college. These two got their big break when they were hired to write on the failed Fantasy Island reboot of the late 90s. And even though that show died, they would plug away and get writing jobs on shows like Popular, One Tree Hill, and... It's okay, guys. Everyone makes mistakes, but it was their work on Felicity they would catch the attention of series creator J.J. Abrams. He saw that they worked well together and felt they would be a good fit on a show. So J.J., Jeffrey Lieber, and Damon Lindelof hired the pair halfway through the show's first season. They would quickly climb the ladder and eventually become the show's executive producers. Along with the rest of the writing staff, they would even win the prestigious Writers Guild of America award. Adam and Edward would devise the idea for Once Upon a Time while working on Lost.
Wow!
Wait a minute, I will dive into that in a little bit. In a Collider interview from October 2011, Horowitz had this to say about the origins of Once Upon a Time. Quote, "The seed of it was that we were trying to figure out what it is about storytelling that we really love. And what we love is the mystery and excitement of exploring lots of different worlds. Fairytales clicked with us because they were so much in the DNA of what made us storytellers to begin with. If we can go between two different worlds and see two different sides of these characters, for us writers, that's a new way to explore characters and what makes them tick and come at them from different angles. What you always want as a writer is to find different ways to explore the characters, and that's what got us excited about this idea. So the show's original idea was for Snow White and Prince Charming's daughter to arrive in a town that was the Enchanted Forest, with a curse placed upon it. They pitched the idea to a variety of networks, but all of them said that the script was filled with too many ideas and characters, and they all rejected the show. But while working on Lost, they would realize their mistake. The way that the story was interpreted was too straightforward. Working with Damon Lindelof taught them to focus on the characters and their past, to tell the stories of what they lost and the experiences that shaped them into who they were today. So they retooled their idea, and now the show was about Snow White, Prince Charming, and their allies all falling under the curse of the evil queen, Regina. A curse that traps them all in a small town called Storybrooke, where everyone's memories have been erased and replaced with new ones. Now they all believe that they're people who live in this small town under the rule of evil Mayor Regina Mills. But there is a flaw in Regina's plan. You see, Snow White and Prince Charming had a child named Emma, whom they placed in a magical wardrobe to transport her to our world. Years later, Emma would grow up and get a knock on her door from a young boy who she gave up for adoption named Henry. Henry tells Emma that she is the savior, the only one who could break the curse and restore everyone's memories. So Emma travels to Storybrooke to free its victims and reunite with her family. And as the show would continue, it revealed new shocking twists and turns that took the story into unexpected directions. They pitched the new idea, and ABC would pick it up. Production soon began, and casting was key to making this show successful. Like Lost, the series would have been a disaster without the perfect actors to play these roles. Edward and Adam were lucky in obtaining all the actors for whom they had written these big roles for, a thing which rarely happens. And the first character that had to be cast was Snow White, the fairest of them all. Kitsis and Horowitz were huge fan of Jennifer Goodwin's work on the HBO hit series Big Love. Jennifer was the perfect choice to play Snow White. What I liked about her performance was that she was strong, not just when she shot arrows at bad guys or got into sword fights. No, she was also strong in character. Goodwin was able to convey everything that made Snow White a hero: her intelligence, her leadership, and her compassion. Jennifer Goodwin said that she had always wanted to play Snow White, and when she read the script, she loved how fully fleshed out she was. She was excited to play this righteous leader who was not perfect. She made mistakes and suffered due to them, but did everything she could to overcome those choices. Even though Katie Sackhoff would audition for the role of Emma Swan 5 times, it was Jennifer Morrison who would be cast instead as Snow White and Prince Charming's daughter. Morrison was a rising star in Hollywood at the time, with her breakout role as immunologist Allison Cameron on the TV series House. She had just recently left her 13-episode run on How I Met Your Mother, and Adam and Edward jumped at the chance to cast her as the savior of Storybrooke. Jennifer was impressed with the script for Once Upon a Time, but it wasn't the fantastical nature of the script that drew her in. Instead, it was Emma's struggles to overcome her trauma. She was a woman who was abandoned as a child and had to survive on her own. Now that she had to let someone in, she has to lower her shields. She had to bond with a person who is a reminder of the most vulnerable moment of her life: the son that she gave away. She's been racked with guilt for years because she felt that she had thrown her child into the same difficult life that Emma had suffered through. So when Henry shows up with wild tales of magical curses and an evil queen, she's initially hesitant, but eventually gives in and travels to a town in Maine called Storybrooke. Emma Swan is loosely based on the story of the Ugly Duckling, someone who is raised in a world where they don't fit in, then finds their true family, and finally discovers a place where they belong. Throughout the series, her relationships with the rest of the cast would grow and change. She winds up becoming a mother to Henry, and finds the family she's been looking for since she was an infant. As for her father, Prince Charming would be played by Josh Dallas. Dallas said he instantly fell in love with this role. He said the creative license and realism incorporated into a fairy tale character was a brilliant choice. Originally, Misha Collins would be offered this role, but he turned it down. Josh had just finished playing the role of Vandral in the first Thor film, so he was already on Disney's radar. Once he auditioned, it became apparent that he was meant to play the legendary prince. Josh was the only one who could convey the sincerity and complexity of a character who for centuries was just seen as a placeholder in classic fairy tales. One of the especially significant roles on this show was the Dark One, aka Rumpelstiltskin, aka Mr. Gold. This part would be explicitly written for Scottish actor Robert Carlyle. Carlyle has a decades-long career, including roles in classics such as Trainspotting and The Full Monty. Adam and Edward never thought he would agree to take the part, so they were thrilled when he said yes. Rumple was a multi-layered character with a rich backstory that allowed Robert to stretch his legs as an actor. Funny story, Robert Carlyle said that his first exposure to acting was in the story of Rumpelstiltskin. He said that a local theater group came to his school when he was 6 and performed the fairy tale for the children. Robert said that he was fascinated by the character and felt like it was fate when the opportunity came to play him. Rumpelstiltskin, or Mr. Gold as he would later be named in the real world, would become Once Upon a Time's most popular character. In the show, Rumple is revealed to have been a poor spinster. When he is drafted to fight in the Ogre War, he meets a seer who tells him that his actions in the battlefield will leave his son fatherless. So he cripples himself to escape his fate. However, he gets branded a coward, and his wife rejects him. Years later, she abandons him and their son. And after years of abuse from the king's soldiers, he would eventually become the Dark One, a being of pure evil. Yet, as Rumple was fond of saying, all magic comes with a price. And his price would be to lose the most precious thing in his life, his son. One of the most memorable aspects of Robert's portrayal of the character was his mannerisms and voice.
All magic comes with a price.
You can't have everything.
Oh, perhaps he can.
Carlyle said he came up with his portrayal of the character for 3 reasons. One was the makeup. The second was using a type of acting method called commedia dell'arte. And third, he copied the voice of his 6-year-old son. Another breakout character in the series was that of the evil queen, aka Regina. played by Lana Parrilla. Even though Lana was in an episode of Lost, Adam and Edward had never previously met her. She got the job when she read one line in the monologue she was given to perform.
Sorry I'm late.
And I couldn't picture anyone else playing the role. Lana was able to portray both the melodramatic evil queen as well as the tortured woman trying to overcome her tragic past. She was obsessed with killing Snow for her involvement in the death of the man she loved, but she also loved Henry. It was because of him she let go of her hatred and became a better person. Regina's arc in this series was brilliant, and Lana was incredible. She was able to convey the multi-layered aspects of her personality. She manifested the psychological abuse from her mother, her love for Henry, her hatred for Snow White, and her descent into evil to the audience with just one look. The fact that this woman was never nominated for an Emmy is a travesty. The show would premiere on October 23rd, 2011, and would become an instant hit. It was also an instant scandal. You see, during this time, the comic book Fables had been publishing since 2002. It's one of the most creative fantasy comic book series, which finally ended its run in May 2024. It involves a group of fairy tale characters who call themselves Fables and live in a magically hidden neighborhood in New York City, having been exiled from their homeland. Snow White is the mayor of Fabletown, and the story involves characters fighting a war against the mysterious enemy known as the Adversary. As you can see, there are some striking similarities between these two properties, and Fables fans were pissed. It also didn't help that ABC had bought the rights to make a Fables TV show in 2008. However, nothing ever materialized, and then years later, Once Upon a Time would be released. So it has raised some eyebrows. It also didn't help that Adam and Edward initially denied they knew anything about Fables, only to backpedal by saying that they might have read a couple issues. Luckily, Fables author Bill Willingham put an end to these accusations. In an interview with Comic Book Resources, Willingham said that Fables wasn't exactly unique. There were many other stories with premises similar to Fables that inspired him to write the series in the first place, such as Fractured Fairytales, The 10th Kingdom, The Charmings, Into the Woods, and so many more. When he was asked about the denial and backpedaling by Adam and Edward, he said, quote, "Maybe they remembered reading Fables back then, but didn't want to mention it because we've become very litigious people." Later in the interview, he directly told fans, quote, "As grateful as I am to discover so many loyal Fables readers willing to man the barricades to help protect a story they love, as much as it moves me to realize I've been part in creating something that clearly moves you, affecting your lives in ways that only a good story, well told, can, I think it's time to lay off. Perhaps it's time to quit rising up in public venues to accuse these folks of grand theft fables, even if you still think it's so."
Before we continue with our video, here's a reminder to click the Store tab on any of our JoBlo channels and browse our collection of the latest and freshest designs in our merch store. Go get you some.
When the show premiered, people were instantly drawn to these new takes on classic fairy tale characters. The romance between Snow White and Prince Charming was one of the most popular storylines of the first few seasons. A big part was the twist on the Prince Charming tale, which was cleverly infused with elements of Mark Twain's The Prince and the Pauper. On the show, Prince Charming is a farmer named David, who learns that he is a twin and that his brother was taken by King George to be raised as his own. However, James is spoiled and cruel. Due to his arrogance, he gets killed in a duel, so his death put in danger an alliance between the king and King Midas. David is blackmailed into pretending to be his brother to kill a dragon. He does this and winds up in an arranged marriage with Midas's daughter. Eventually, David is robbed by an exiled Snow White, which begins their epic romance. Jennifer Goodwin and Josh Dallas had incredible chemistry that would carry over off-set. They fell in love and are still married to this day. The influence of Lost is evident on this show. It followed the same story structure, with current-day parts of an episode, and the use of flashbacks, which showed the characters' origins and the events that deeply affected them. There were also some fun Lost Easter eggs thrown in. Notable examples would be Henry and Regina, who live in a house that had the number 108. which are the lost numbers added up together. Henry eats Apollo bars, which are the candy bars featured on Lost. And my favorite was when Emma and Mary Margaret drink a very important whiskey that is pretty expensive in Lost. In fact, as King George would say,
"This swallow is worth more than you could make in a month."
Even though the main cast got multiple flashbacks, the supporting characters had some of the best episodes. Jiminy Cricket is particularly one of my favorites. It's very sad and very disturbing. In the episode That Still Small Voice, Jiminy is the son of two con artists that he feels obligated to work with. He feels trapped and decides to make a deal with Rumpelstiltskin, who gives him an elixir to destroy his parents. But he's tricked by his father and winds up using the potion on Geppetto's family, which turns them into puppets. And as penance, he has the blue fairy turn him into a cricket to help Geppetto, and eventually Pinocchio. One of the most popular fictional dwarves in cinematic history, Grumpy, also had an excellent episode. In the episode called Dreamy, Grumpy is originally called Dreamy and falls in love with a fairy called Nova. But tragically, he's forced to reject her when he learns she will lose her wings if she runs away with him. So he breaks her heart, and due to his actions, he was given a new name, Grumpy. As you could tell, many actors from Lost would join the cast in iconic roles. Belle, Jafar, the Snow Queen, a giant, and the Wicked Witch of the West were some of the most notable. But it wasn't just former Lost actors that appeared on Once Upon a Time. Some familiar faces would also appear, such as James Doran, Rose McIver, and Sinkwell Walls. But one of the biggest stars that appeared on the show was the then unknown Sebastian Stan, who played the Mad Hatter for 6 episodes. But this was one of the downfalls of the show. There were too many characters. In Once Upon a Time, many characters would go nowhere, like Hansel and Gretel, Mulan, Dorothy, and the most blatant one, Red Riding Hood. These characters would leave gaping holes in the viewers' minds. And I think it's because, unlike Lost, each of these roles could have had their own show. For example, Richard Alpert on Lost was a fantastic character, but I was okay with not seeing him for most of the season. But when he did show up, it felt organic, and he had an important role in that episode. However, you cannot throw in the Mad Hatter for a few episodes and then have him drop off the face of the earth. Then you briefly mention him, and we never see him again. Do you really expect us just to let that go? Many of these roles were historic to both literature and cinema, and that would turn out to be a big problem. You see, if you wanted to see more stories about Tinkerbell, then you're giving less time to Snow White and Emma, and the show falls apart. So it's like you're teasing the audience with chocolate and then give them candy corn. Yeah, it's still candy, but meh. Still, the series was able to balance these characters for a time. In the first season, the audience gets introduced to both the main and recurring characters. They learn their backstories and the importance they have to the lore of the show. When the show started, it was Regina's relationship between her, Henry, and Emma that drove that season. Regina was the primary villain of the first season, but she was a multifaceted character. For the first few episodes of season 1, she was portrayed as a standard bad guy. She's scheming in the shadows and making moves to destroy Emma with her henchmen. But then they aired the episode, The Stable Boy, that would throw fans' views of Regina on their head. We learn that she's in love with a man named Daniel, the family's stable boy. One day, Regina saves Snow White's life when Snow loses control of her horse. A grateful king proposes to Regina, which her mother accepts on her behalf. She plans to run away with Daniel, and when Snow White sees them together, she tells Snow that Daniel is her true love and wants to run away with him. Regina tells Snow White to keep her escape a secret from her mother, but Snow is manipulated by Regina's mother, and the girl tells her about Daniel and Regina's plan. When Regina and Daniel are about to run away, her mother appears and kills him. Now the audience realizes that the reason for her hatred towards Snow White was understandable and tragic, and that the classic fairy tale is not as black and white as we were led to believe. The first season also had some surprising twists and revelations. Some examples are Rumple being revealed to be the Beast in the classic fairy tale of Beauty and the Beast. We learned the shocking identity of the mysterious stranger on a motorcycle, and we witnessed the sheriff's murder. That twist in particular was one of the most shocking moments in the series. You see, the sheriff was being built up to become Emma's love interest for the season. Then out of nowhere, we find out that he's actually the huntsman, who is under the control of Regina and has become her lover. When he rejects Regina, in a jealous rage, she kills him. Wait, now that I think about it, maybe Emma dodged a bullet considering what his motto is.
I don't make love. I hard.
At the end of the season, it had hooked viewers in and created a massive fan base. Then the second season just said,
"Hold my beer."
This second season would delve into the past of one of the most interesting antagonists of the series, Regina's mother, Cora, aka the Queen of Hearts. Cora was a monster who was ruthless in her quest for power, so much so that she ruined both her children's lives. Barbara Hershey was shockingly good in this role. She was able to portray a woman who came from nothing and would eventually become a powerful queen who could crush you in an instant. She had a love affair with the Dark One, but took out her heart and rejected him because she came to believe that, quote, love was a weakness. This led her to make cruel and evil choices like abandoning a child to keep her social standing, killing Snow White's mother to make her daughter queen, and as I said before, murdered Regina's true love to force her to marry the king. I love that, like Regina, Cora's descent into evil was understandable. In the episode The Miller's Daughter, her origin story is told. Cora was originally poor and worked with her father, a drunken miller, to survive. She is seen as trash and treated as such by the king and the other royals. Cora is afraid that she will always be seen as nothing and is angry when she is told this by the king. What happens next is the classic tale of how
fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering.
Cora was supposed to only appear in just a few episodes, but became so popular that she was made essential to the show's lore. Adam and Edward loved the character of Cora so much that they got Rose McGowan to play her younger version. The other character that had a massive impact on the direction of the show was Killian Jones, aka Captain Hook, played by Colin O'Donoghue. O'Donoghue is an Irish actor whose career was just beginning to take off at the time of his audition. He had guest starred in a few TV shows and was the lead in a horror film with Anthony Hopkins called The Right. When he auditioned for Once Upon a Time, he had no idea how big the show was. Colin was perplexed about the role because his view of Captain Hook was that of Dustin Hoffman in Spielberg's classic film Hook. Even though he didn't expect to get the part, he still auditioned. And O'Donoghue's pessimism may have won him the role, because his take on Hook was that of an angry bad boy. This instantly won over Adam and Edward. Like Cora, Hook was originally not supposed to have a huge role in the show, but his chemistry with Jennifer Morrison was undeniable. So Killian overcame his darkness and became Emma's true love. Rumple and Hook would have a particularly deep hatred for each other. It was revealed that Rumpelstiltskin's wife left him and his son to be with Killian. After becoming the Dark One, he tracks her down, kills her, and cuts off Killian's hand to create his infamous Hook hand. Due to this, Killian renames himself Captain Hook and goes on a quest to kill the Dark One, whom he has dubbed the Crocodile. Season 2 would also have some new shocking revelations, such as the identity of Henry's father, how Snow White's mother died, and the introduction of the Home Office, an organization that would introduce one of the best, if not the best, villains of the entire show. This season would also begin the new structure of the show. The first part of the following seasons would be divided into two sections. The season's first half would have one or two main villains who would have their plans foiled, which would lead into the second half that introduced a new big bad. This new villain would battle the characters. Then we would get a thrilling ending for the season, which would set up the following season. But something occurred between seasons 2 and 3 that would illustrate the problem that severely hurt the show: the oversaturation of the Once Upon a Time market. You see, ABC greenlit a spin-off called Once Upon a Time in Wonderland, which was released to capitalize on the popularity of the show. This series would center on Alice from Alice in Wonderland. It began with her escaping an insane asylum, returning to Wonderland, and searching for her true love, a genie named Cyrus. The main antagonists on the show were Jafar and the Red Queen. I could do an entire video about this show and its failures, but as I said earlier, it revealed the massive mistake that Edward and Adam were making. They were pushing their luck with fans and banking on their devotion to Once Upon a Time. Sadly, that loyalty they had created with them would eventually snap apart like a rubber band stretched too far. Season 3 would be the best of this series, and I think the peak of this show's magic. The villain for this season would be none other than Rumpelstiltskin's father, Peter Pan. Yes, in one of the smartest creative choices ever made for one of the most beloved characters in the world. The classic fantastical hero, Peter Pan, was turned into the entire series' biggest villain. Robbie Kay would play Peter Pan, and did an incredible job portraying a charming, manipulative, and surprisingly terrifying villain. In this season, we learned that Rumpel and his father Malcolm traveled to Wonderland, a land that his father dreamt of as a child. To his disappointment, he is told by his shadow that only children live in this world. So Malcolm abandons Rumpel to regain his youth and stay in Wonderland. He renames himself Peter Pan and is told that even though he is still a boy, there is a ticking clock on his survival. To be immortal, he must have the heart of a true believer. And this turns out to be his great-grandson, Henry. When Pan is defeated, the second half of the season would introduce one of my favorite characters of the show, Regina's half-sister, Zelena, aka the Wicked Witch of the West, played by Rebecca Mader. Mader was yet another cast member of Lost who had crossed over to Once Upon a Time. Because of their friendship with her, Horowitz and Kitsis wrote the part specifically for Rebecca. In my opinion, the show's quality would suffer in the later seasons, and Zelena was the only thing that kept me coming back. We learned that she was abandoned by Cora, and raised by an abusive father who hated her due to her magical gifts. When she found out about her abandonment and saw the blessed life that Regina had, she became jealous and despised her for the life she felt she should have had. She sought out Rumpel and had him train her to harness her powerful gifts. But due to her jealousy, Zelena would be rejected by the Dark One, and the jealousy she had for her sister would literally turn her green. Season 4's decision on what the focus of the first half of that season would be was controversial. This choice would cause many fans to theorize that a certain white-gloved rodent may have been using its power behind the scenes. Why, you ask? Well, a big chunk of Season 4 would revolve around a Disney property that was at the height of its popularity, Frozen. Yes, the animated sensation about a snow princess with the song that every 5-year-old sang that year, performed by
Adele Dazeem.
Adam and Edward have denied these conspiracy theories, and said that it was their plan to use the characters from Frozen in Season 4 and not Disney. To this day, though, some fans think that they're lying to not piss off the mouse. But even if they were forced to incorporate the Frozen franchise, I will give them credit, they made it work. And I think that was due to another Lost alum, Elizabeth Mitchell, who played Ingrid, the Snow Queen, who was Elsa and Anna's aunt that also possessed frost powers. It was Ingrid's past and her trauma from the hatred she received for her abilities that made her unhinged. The point in her life that cemented her turn to villainy was when she accidentally kills her sister Helga, and was portrayed by her other sister, Gerda. A sister who trapped her in a magical urn for decades, only to be unknowingly released due to her niece's actions. Unlike many of the show's other villains, Ingrid would die at the end of the Frozen arc, and stayed dead. I always wish that she would have stuck around, just like Zelena did. The second part of this season was when the rubber band started to wear thin. A trio of new classic bad guys would be brought into the fold: Maleficent, Ursula, and Cruella de Vil, the group that was dubbed the Queens of Darkness. And it was a mess. There were too many complicated storylines, some of the characters were underused, and a meta aspect of the show was added that came out of nowhere. The introduction of the authors, that I always felt created massive questions that were never answered. I also felt that it took attention away from what made the show special, the characters. But it was Season 5 where things started going off the rails. The first part of the season would be about Camelot and Emma's internal struggle and its effect on her family, friends, and Hook after she gets turned into the new Dark One. The story was boring, and also tried to shove in another Disney character that I always found to be utterly boring, Merida, the redheaded girl from Brave. She was in the first half of the season, and it seemed like she was only there because they were running out of Disney characters. The second half of the season would be centered around Hades and the underworld. Dead characters such as David's evil twin brother James, Cruella, Prince Henry, and Cora would all be brought back. But sadly, many of these characters would be wasted opportunities. The one example that stood out to me was David's twin brother, James. At first, you're told that James hates David because he was the one given away by his family, while David was kept. In his episode, James tricks Emma into letting him kidnap Robin Hood's son. What's frustrating is that you could have delved into his resentment toward David and the loss of the love that he never got as a child. But instead, his hatred towards his brother was because he stole his glory. Then it became just another physical confrontation. Such a missed opportunity. But the worst moment in that season was the last episode for Cora, when she was let into heaven.
No. No. Mm-mm. Mm-mm. No. 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 Hell no. 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 I refuse. No. No.
Yes, Cora, the woman who murdered hundreds of people and the person who ripped out the heart of her daughter's true love and crushed it. The same woman who killed Snow White's mother, the Queen of Hearts, who was a brutal dictator who loved to decapitate her subjects. This woman gets to go to heaven just because she made up with her kids? Yeah, I call bullshit on that. Hades was yet another mistake made by the creators. They cast Greg German as Hades, who I felt made the wrong decision on how to portray the ruler of the underworld. Maybe it's unfair, but he just couldn't match James Woods' brilliant take on the character from the 1997 Hercules. Woods' greatest decision was his choice to play Hades like he was a slimy Hollywood agent, but German's take was to make him a snob. Although I do think his chemistry with Rebecca Mader helped sell the Hades and Selena love affair arc. But with Season 6 would come the lowest point of the series, and sadly also the end of the show. The season would start out with Mr. Hyde and the Evil Queen as the antagonists for the first half. Confused? Let me explain. At the end of Season 5, Regina would suddenly begin to talk about how she felt she had an evil half, whom she dubbed the Evil Queen. When the team meets Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, they wind up getting a magical potion created by Jekyll that has the ability to split your evil self into a separate person. Regina takes it and splits her evil half from herself. So the writers decided that instead of Regina having character development because of her love for Henry, seeing the error of her ways and forgiving her former enemies, it was really because she was the Phoenix. The final half of the season was about Rumple's mother, the Black Fairy, releasing a new dark curse and killing Emma's belief that she was the savior, which begins to destroy the enchanted forest. Throughout the final part of the season, the Black Fairy's henchman is the son of Rumple and Belle, named Gideon. She stole Gideon as a child and raised him in the fairy world. The season would end with the defeat of the Black Fairy. Hook and Emma would get married, Rumple and Belle would get back a de-aged Gideon to raise as their own, and Henry wrote that the final battle had been won, and they all lived happily ever after.
Hello?
Are you Henry Mills? Your family needs you.
And they all lived happily ever after. And they all lived happily ever after.
A new book opens when Once Upon a Time returns on a new night.
Okay, so this is when the rubber band would finally snap. Season 7 would be an example of someone trying to squeeze blood from a stone. Many of the series cast members chose not to renew their contracts, so in a move that many consider made out of desperation, the show would be given a soft reboot. It was a continuation of the previous 6 seasons. It starts with Henry, who is a struggling writer living in Seattle. Henry does not remember Storybrooke. In fact, he believes that his adventures with Emma, Regina, and the rest of his family are just a novel he wrote. One day, a young girl named Lucy knocks on his door and tells him she is his daughter. She explains to him that he is the victim of a curse that has made him forget her and her mother. It's revealed that Henry had left Storybrooke to travel the fairy tale multiverse, looking for adventure and to be part of the story. He meets a new Cinderella, played horribly by Dania Ramirez, who made me want to turn off my TV whenever I saw her in a scene. Okay, that's mean, but I believe her casting as Henry's love interest was a huge mistake, as she had no chemistry with Andrew West, the actor playing the adult Henry. Lucy tells Henry that her mother is Cinderella, and that her stepmother is Cinderella's evil stepmother, Victoria, who is really Lady Tremaine from the classic Cinderella story. They live in a Seattle fairy tale neighborhood called Hyperion Heights. She is trying to gentrify the neighborhood to separate the fairy tale characters from each other forever. Many fans think that the final season's choice of doing a soft reboot was the death of Once Upon a Time. Although for the few who did enjoy it, they put the blame on the show being moved to the Friday death slot. The drastic changes were a gamble by Edward Kitsis and Adam Horowitz, but in throwing the dice, they would come up snake eyes. So because Season 7 would alienate a majority of fans, have a poor performance on the Friday night time slot, and failed to get new viewers, ABC would decide to close the book on our modern fairy tale. For all its flaws, Once Upon a Time brought a fresh take on stories about characters we had read about as children. The show still holds up, for the most part. Even the later seasons, which dipped in quality, and the disaster that was Season 7, still had its moments. You can watch Once Upon a Time for yourself on Hulu and Disney+. Also, if you're curious about the failed spin-off Once Upon a Time in Wonderland, that's also available to stream on Disney+. But should this show come back? Well, there have been rumors, and the former cast have all said that they're game to return, but officially, it's a no. And in my opinion, it should stay a big old no. Once Upon a Time had its time, and it's past. Let's keep that book closed and let other stories have a chance to be told. So if you feel like watching Snow White and Prince Charming share that magical kiss, see the evil queen and wicked witch duke it out like cowboys at the OK Corral, and want to learn if they lived happily ever after, then be sure to open up that magical book and read those famous words, Once Upon a Time, and let the magic begin. I'm Jesse Shade speaking on behalf of Dave Arroyo for the JoBlo YouTube network, and thanks again for watching our show. If you like what you see, please subscribe to the JoBlo Originals channel. Tell all your friends who like this sort of content, and turn on the bell to receive notifications for all our latest videos. We are an independent company that appreciates all of your support, and we will see you next time on the next episode of Gone But Not Forgotten.
Thank you for clicking on our video, everybody. If you like what you saw here, please make sure you like the video and subscribe and share with your friends who like this sort of content. JoBlo was created by movie fans for movie fans, and we appreciate your support.